What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today, we're talking Keyforge, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking Keyforge. Now, I owe an apology at well, I don't really owe an apology, to be fair, but at least a quick explanation. I know that Keyforge was one of the games on which I built this channel when it started growing. It was Keyforge and Transformers is gone. And I know that it has been a while since I showed you Keyforge stuff. And the reason for that is extremely simple. FFG have not really given us much Keyforge at all lately. We've just not had Keyforge stuff to talk about. We've not been having a bunch of news. We've not been having a bunch of reveals of Dark Tidings, a new set. We've just not had much Keyforge to talk about. But the good news is there is now Keyforge to talk about, so we can talk about some Keyforge. Now, we are talking about content creator reveals today, community reveals, so we will make sure that where possible, when we can, we will be giving credit to the people who revealed them, unless I really can't find out who it is. For those of you asking, no, I don't have any creator reveals myself coming. As for the reason why, I have absolutely no idea. That is a question you need to ask to somebody else. So starting off then, let's take a look at a couple of Grand Star Alliance cards that were revealed by the lovely folks over at Crazy Killing Machine, some of our very favourite folks in the community. And starting off, we've got Ceaseforge, and Ceaseforge is a very nice card indeed. Oh, I need to give a shout out quickly to Simon Roadhouse, who did let me know where these came from. Simon Roadhouse, lovely dude. So Ceaseforge then is an artifact that gives you an Amber bonus. So when you play it, you gain an Amber. This is good. And when you play it, you put 2 time counters on Ceaseforge. And while this artifact is in play, players cannot forge keys. You can't forge keys. Your opponent can't forge keys. Nobody's forging any keys. But at the start of your turn, you remove a time counter from Ceaseforge, and at the point where there are no time counters on it, you destroy it. Now, incidentally, this is awesome because it does mean that you get first dibs on forging a key. You remove it at the time counter, that is, at the beginning of your turn. So you play it down, you can't forge a key, but you already have, if you can. And if you can forge a key in the middle of your turn and you play this before you do, that's just silly. Unless you're 1 Amber away and this is the only way to gain an Amber, in which case, gut it, I suppose. And then your opponent has a turn, but they can't forge keys. Comes back to you, you remove a time counter, you can't forge keys. Goes to your opponent, they can't forge keys. Come back to you, you remove the time counter, and then you can forge keys. And essentially, this is a buy yourself some time card. This is a card that you play to desperately buy yourself a little bit of time. And that's the goal here. That's literally all you're going for. You are trying to make sure that you get a bit more time than your opponent has. If you're ahead in the game and you're rushing ahead, don't play this card. But if your opponent's had a better setup than you, if they're rushing towards victory, if you need a few turns to collect your thoughts, so to speak, to build up your board, then at that stage, you go nuts, ladies and gentlemen. This is not a card that is going to help you every single turn and every single game. There are going to be plenty of games you don't play this. But there are also going to be some decks that have multiples of this card in, unless the algorithm says you can't. We don't know that yet. And what that means is that there are going to be games where your opponent has a really good start, and you can stop them forging keys for like 8 turns in a row. And then you finally get a board set up, start forging keys and win. It's going to be a difficult card to play and it's not always going to work, but it is going to really save you some games. If anyone's wondering, the other card we've had that really stops you forging keys is Heart of the Forest, which is another artifact that gives you an Amber bonus. And this is a really weird one, but essentially it's you cannot forge keys if you've got more keys than your opponent. So if you're tied, you can, and if you're behind, you can. It just essentially stops one player forging until they win. The other card that was revealed by the lovely folks at Crazy Killing Machine and is a Star Alliance card is Aember-Vac. And this is all to do with that tide mechanic that you may or may not have forgotten about. Now, remember that in Dark Tidings, every deck is coming with a tide card. And essentially, one player will have high tide and the other will have low tide. If you've got high tide, nothing. If you've got low tide, you have the option of gaining free chains, so you draw fewer cards at the end of your turn, but then raising the tide, and essentially having a tide raised for you is a good thing. Now, this is an upgrade, and when you play it, you raise the tide. Now, this is obviously a good thing. If you raise the tide using a tide card, you got to give yourself free chains. You don't want free chains. Chains are bad, okay? So what you really want to do is have some cards like Aember-Vac that can raise the tide for you. From what we've seen so far, you want the tide raised for you. You want to be high tide without having to take those chains. Go team! And then this creature gains, at the start of your turn, if the tide is high, capture 2 amber. Now, you don't keep the amber, of course. When the creature with the amber on is destroyed, your opponent gets the amber back. But this is a really interesting thing. Now, this is a common card. So, again, unless the algorithm has told us differently, this is actually going to come up in a fair few decks. Which means your opponent is often going to be in a super awkward choice. Like, if you've got 2 of these out, you're capturing 4 amber at the start of your turn. And remember, your opponent can get that amber back, but they cannot get it back before their forge a key step. So you capture the amber, it goes to your opponent's turn, they can't forge a key, they get it back, it goes to your turn, you capture the amber again, and round we go. Which means that your opponent is going to have to take out those creatures to get the amber back, and obviously get rid of the upgrade. Because if your opponent gets the amber back by destroying the creature, they will obviously get rid of the upgrade as well. But there's going to be some turns where your opponent can only forge the following turn if they raise the tide and take those chains. So you put your opponent in an awkward position where either they manually raise the tide and take those chains, or they submit to having their amber captured. Neither of these is a good eventuality. Moving over into Untamed, we need to give a shout out to the lovely, amazing Spider Tank. And just to be clear, right, we love Amazing Spider Tank. We are fans of Amazing Spider Tank. It is a lovely blog run by a lovely dude that we've been using, well, since it started, which was pretty much when Keyforge started. We like it. And we've got a couple of Untamed cards here, starting off with old Paddy. What we've got, now this is an evil twin creature, but do remember we have previously seen the non-evil twin version of old Paddy. For those that have forgotten, because Keyforge has been very quiet for a while, there are going to be such things in Dark Tidings as evil twin decks. So there are going to be 2 decks that are essentially identical decks, and the names are going to be, you know, Wassie's Power of Thought and Wassie's Power of Thought's evil twin. And the only difference between the decks are going to be that cards that can be evil twins, not all cards can, some can't, but any that can will be evil twins in the evil twin deck, and the only way to get the evil twin versions of the cards is to get them in an evil twin deck. So old Paddy here is the evil twin version of the previous old Paddy. Previous old Paddy, 5 power, 0 armor, and when you reap, you discard the bottom card of your deck, or the bottom 3 cards if the tide is high, and play each creature discarded this way, 1 at a time. So again, another great advantage if the tide is high here. You can play, if all goes well, 3 creatures without paying for them. It's the kind of thing that's worth taking a chance, but then again, it's not guaranteed. Well, evil twin old Paddy here, still 5 power, still 0 armor, and when you reap, you discard the bottom card of your opponent's deck, or the bottom 3 cards if the tide is high, so far so similar, and you destroy a creature that shares a house with one of the discarded cards. Now, it is interesting to note it says destroy a creature, not destroy an enemy creature, so this will allow you to target your own creatures. So if you've got something, I mean, the classic example here is Brend the Fanatic. When it's destroyed, you steal 3 amber. So sometimes you will want to target one of your own creatures. Of course, the creature targeted must share a house with one of the cards that you discarded. So if you don't share any houses with your opponent, it's not going to work anyway. But hey-ho. Generally speaking, you're just going to destroy one of your opponent's creatures. Now, having said that, this is kind of awkward because you might not actually get it. Like, if you hit shadows, but your opponent has no shadows creatures on the field, you don't actually get to destroy anything. You only get to destroy a creature that shares a house with one of the discarded cards if there is a creature in play that shares a house with one of the discarded cards. Now, it doesn't say you may, so I believe here, and it's not going to happen all that often because you won't be sharing that many houses, but if the only creature in play that shares a house with the discarded cards is yours, I believe you would be forced to destroy one of your own creatures even if you didn't want to. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of this one. I much prefer regular old Paddy. And that's not to say this is terrible, but it absolutely is to say that, generally speaking, like, I want to be able to play my creatures for free. That's going to build my board. That's going to give me a big advantage. With Evil Twin Old Paddy, I get to destroy one of my opponent's creatures, but I don't actually necessarily get to, and even when I do, the one I destroy is going to be random, and I don't know if this is going to work as often as I want it to work, and that makes me a little bit sad. And the final card we need to have a little bit of a chat about today is the Mysticeti. This is an artifact which is basically a whale/boat, which I am totally digging. It is again untamed, and what we've got is an action whereby you exhaust one or more friendly untamed creatures, and then you give the Mysticeti free +1 power counters for each creature exhausted this way, and move it anywhere in your battle line as a creature with 0 power and taunt. Taunt, of course, remember, says that you cannot attack the neighbours of a creature with taunt unless they also have taunt. You must attack the creature that has taunt. So essentially what you're doing here is exhausting your other creatures to get a really big, beefy whale ship, probably evil whale ship, that goes and parks itself next to 2 of your creatures you want protecting, and then you're a big beefy ship which is going to protect. I mean, if you exhaust 3 untamed creatures, you've got what is essentially a 9 power creature with taunt that your opponent is going to have to take out before they can take out the creatures either side. On the one hand, it is a really good way of protecting your creatures. It is a really good way of going, right, well, I really don't want this creature gone, so I'm just going to move this over, jobs are good 'un. But then, on the other hand, if I'm giving it 9 power counters, then that means that I've exhausted 3 creatures. Which means that's 3 creatures that cannot fight, cannot reap, etc. It only works for friendly untamed creatures, and this is an untamed artifact with a non-omni ability. So if I'm using this, it is an untamed turn. Which means every creature that I'm choosing to exhaust could be reaping, or could be fighting, and I am giving up reaping for an Amber, and using whatever reap skill there may be. Or I'm giving up fighting, giving up whatever fight skill there may be, just to give 3 power counters to the Mysticeti, which might be worth it. If I can get this big bad ship sat next to one of my creatures that I really want to protect, with 3, 6, 9, 12 power counters, and taunt, which is important, such that my opponent just can't take it out, then it might be worth it. And that is awesome. But it's not always going to be... It's not always going to work. It's always going to work, but it's not always going to be worth it. So once again, I have some reservations. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Those are some new Keyforge cards, and I'm excited. I love Keyforge. Just because I've not been making many Keyforge cards lately doesn't mean I don't love Keyforge. Doesn't mean my love for Keyforge has gone anywhere. I still love Keyforge. I still play Keyforge. Actually, I played a game with Keyforge against the dude who edits Tabletop Gaming Magazine. I should probably pop that on the channel, shouldn't I? It was a fun game. I love Keyforge. I am still a big cheerleader for Keyforge. We've just not had any Keyforge stuff to talk about for a while now. But these are not the only content creator reveals that we are going to see. And that means that there are going to be more Keyforge videos from me coming in the near future. And the rule is very simple. Watch them, share them, tell your friends. My Digimon videos are proving very popular lately. My Marvel Champions videos are proving very popular lately. So, you know, if my Keyforge videos are just as popular as those, then I'll make sure they get just as high priority. For now, ladies and gentlemen, let's all rejoice we've got Keyforge to talk about, and let's rejoice in the comment section. Go nuts! Be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at The Wazzy. That's where we talk Keyforge and a whole bunch of other card games. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCGradio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all kinds of fun things. But by far, the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Keyforge. What's he plays?